The story of a lonely grandfather. His name was Arkady Petrovich. His loneliness was not loud and empty, but quiet, lived in, like the dust on a long unused secretaire in the living room. It smelled of old paper, joint medicine, and the jam he made out of habit, even though he only ate a few spoonfuls. It was the ticking of the wall clock in the hallway, a massive oak beefeater that had been a wedding gift, and the dull, distant hum of the city beyond the double-paned windows. His world had shrunk to the size of a two-room apartment in a Khrushchev-era building on the outskirts of the city. Arkady Petrovich's planet had strict orbits: kitchen, bedroom, living room, toilet, and bathroom. His mornings began with a ritual that never varied: a slow, groaning, and breathless rise from bed, the creaking opening of the kitchen window, followed by a deep breath of cold morning air, a generous serving of oatmeal cooked with water, and 2 cups of tea from a 3-day-old pot. Then he would read the evening news, which he subscribed to more out of habit than out of interest. The news was foreign, happening in a parallel universe where he was no longer a resident. The morning ritual ended with a trip to the living room window. His window was a TV that showed the same ever-changing series called The Life of the Yard. He knew all the main characters by their names, which he had given them. There was Karapuzika, a young, perpetually disheveled mother with twins who were always out for a walk at the same time. Business Sneakers was a man in his 40s, always wearing an expensive tracksuit and holding a phone to his ear. He would rush out of the building as if he were being chased. The gang were teenagers who gathered in the evenings by the bench, their laughter muffled as if from beneath a layer of water. He watched the scenery change. In winter, the yard was covered with snowdrifts that were never cleared. In spring, the muddy, trampled ground was exposed. In summer, the sparse, dusty greenery flourished, and in autumn, the yellow leaves of the 3 skinny birches covered everything. He was the God observer of this little world, an all-seeing eye that could not change anything. The main, most vivid connection with the outside world was the librarian from the district library, a girl named Masha. Every Thursday, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there would be a knock on the door, and Arkady Petrovich would open it with anticipation. On the threshold would stand Masha, her cheeks flushed from the wind, carrying a large knapsack filled with book spines. "Arkady Petrovich, hello, I've brought you a Kunin and the new Zahar Perlepin, as you requested," she would say, removing her wet boots. He always ordered different things: historical novels, travel books, and modern prose, which he then criticized for its pretentiousness and complexity. However, he was not as interested in the books as he was in these 15-minute visits. He would prepare tea and a small plate of biscuits or leftover gingerbread from the new year in advance. He would also clean the old nickel-plated teapot, the same one he had used to drink tea with Milochka in the kitchen. Masha, a kind, slightly tired girl, always found 10 or 15 minutes to have a cup of tea. She told him about the library's news, how few young people came, and how the management demanded reports on every extra degree of heat in the winter. She would ask, "How are you, Arkady Petrovich? How's your blood pressure?" And this simple, human question would fill him with warmth for several days, until the next Thursday. It was a beacon in his week. He wasn't always alone. Once upon a time, there was Ludmila, his Milochka. She loved to fill the space, any space, with noise, light, and energy. Her laughter, ringing and booming, could be heard even by the neighbors below. She sang while cooking in the kitchen, argued with the TV, and made him dance to Yutsov's records when his heart was heavy. She was the opposite of him, a quiet, somewhat reserved engineer. She brought a healthy dose of chaos to his orderly world. They dreamed of traveling all over the country, seeing the ice on Lake Baikal and the mountains of the Caucasus. But then Olga was born, and their vacations at the seaside were replaced by a dacha, a vegetable garden, and a sandbox in the yard. He didn't regret anything. His world was filled with happiness, bursting at the seams, but he didn't know how to express it. He simply did his job silently, loving them both. Then Olga grew up, flew out of the nest, got married, and moved to another city, 2,000 kilometers away. 3 years later, Milochka passed away. She died of a heart attack. It was sudden. His world, which had already shrunk to the size of their apartment, collapsed like a rotten tree. All that remained were the walls, the beef clock, and her kitchen curtains, which he never had the courage to replace. Olga called every Sunday, at exactly noon. Their conversations were ritualized and similar to each other as 2 peas in a pod. "Dad, hi, how are you?" "I'm fine, daughter. Everything's okay. How's your health? Have you taken your blood pressure?" "Yes, I have. It's normal. I'm taking my pills. Have you been outside?" I went to the store. I have everything I need. Do you need any money? No, thank you. I have enough. Maxim sends his regards. He's doing well in school. Tell him I'm happy for him. Behind these routine, polished phrases, everything unsaid sank. His quiet, daily longing. Her guilt was sharp as a needle, for living so far away, for not being able to be close, for her own life devouring her. They talked about everything and nothing, carefully avoiding the chasm of loneliness that yawned between them. Her grandson, Maxim, came once a year, usually during the May holidays. For Arkady Petrovich, these 3 or 4 days were like a supernova explosion, dazzling, bright, and upending his entire life, but just as fleeting. He bought the kind of food he remembered the boy liked: dumplings, sausages, some new sauce, and fruit. He took out old photo albums from the attic and the chess set he had once taught little Maxim to play. He tried to capture every moment, to remember his face, his voice, and his laughter. But now Maxim was an adult, he was 19. He had his own phone, which he never let go of, his own thoughts, his own interests somewhere in the distant digital world, where Arkady Petrovich could not penetrate. They sat at the same table, eating pelmeni, but separated by a chasm of years, technology, and experience. The grandfather asked about his studies, about his plans for the future. The grandson answered in monosyllables, staring at the screen. Arkady Petrovich felt like an old, useless, outlandish artifact that had somehow found its way into the fast-paced 21st century. After taking his grandson to the train, he returned to the apartment. It suddenly seemed spacious to him, empty to the point of ringing, and the silence in it was no longer familiar, but oppressive, heavy. He went to the window, but the courtyard seemed lifeless and gray. He relived his loneliness anew, each time more acutely. One day, on a particularly chilly and gray October day, when the rain was beating monotonously and insistently against the window, as if demanding to be let in, Arkady Petrovich felt a sudden and intense wave of longing that made him physically ill. His chest ached, and his head spun. He looked at his watch. There were still 3 days until Thursday and Masha's visit. 3 long, empty days. He went to the kitchen to make tea, but his hands were shaking. He realized that he couldn't stay in these walls for another minute. This silent, oppressive loneliness could kill him now. Not a heart attack, not a stroke, just the silence itself will suffocate him. With a great effort of will, overcoming the resistance of his entire body, which was accustomed to rest and routine, he began to dress. He put on a threadbare coat, tied a scarf that his sweetheart had once knitted for him, and picked up a heavy, knobbed cane. Her breathing was labored. "Where are you going, you old fool?" An inner voice mumbled. "You'll catch cold. You'll fall. No one will pick it up." But he left. He slammed the door, and the sound of the latch sounded like a gunshot, a death sentence or the beginning of a new journey. The stairs seemed like Mount Everest. He descended slowly, holding on to the railings, taking deep breaths at each landing. The stairwell smelled of dampness and old carpets. When he reached the street, he stopped, blinded by the gray light and deafened by the city's noise, the honking of cars, the rattling of trams, and the sounds of strangers. He hadn't been a part of this cacophony for a long time. He was just a passive listener. It was 2 blocks to the library. He walked as if he were on a battlefield, ducking the gusts of wind, dodging passers-by, and avoiding puddles. The world was too big, too noisy, and too indifferent. The door to the library jingled. The warm, stuffy air, smelling of glue, paint, and dust, enveloped him. Masha stood up from her desk, surprised. "Arkady Petrovich, what are you doing, in this weather? Do you feel unwell?" She rushed to his side, taking him by the arm. He was shaking. He looked at her, at the shelves of books, at the other customers, a couple of students, an old lady with a trolley. "I'm missing the noise," he said hoarsely, and it was true. He wasn't missing the silence, but the life. The sounds of someone else's life. Masha sat him in an old chair by the heater and brought him a glass of water. He took a sip and set the glass down with trembling hands. I decided to take a walk," he explained, feeling like an old fool. "Wait here, I'll get the books you ordered," said Masha, and she ran off. He sat there, warming up, and looked around. His eyes fell on a large cork notice board at the entrance. It was filled with advertisements for English tutors, kittens for sale, and plumbing services. His eyes were drawn to a small piece of paper printed on a simple printer. "The Petersburg Environs History Club. Let's revive our memories together. The first organizational meeting is on Saturday at 4 p.m. Tea, conversation, and reminiscing." And below, in small print, "All are welcome, especially the old-timers." Arkady Petrovich's heart gave a strange thud. He was an old-timer. He remembered this area from when it was filled with barracks and vacant lots instead of Khrushchev-era buildings, and he remembered how the avenue was built and how these stunted birches were planted in the courtyard. Masha returned with the books. "Here, take these. You're quite cold. Maybe I can accompany you." "No, no, no, daughter," he waved away, suddenly feeling a surge of strength. "Thank you." He took the books and put them in his bag, but his thoughts were no longer about them. He went back to the blackboard and reread the ad. Saturday, 1600. Saturday was 2 days away. These 2 days had passed in an unusual excitement. For the first time in a long time, he was nervous. What would it be like? Who were these people? What would they talk about? What if it was a cult? He reminisced about old photographs, remembered the names of disappeared streets, and the long-forgotten neighbors. He was preparing for something, but he didn't know what it was. On Saturday, he put on his best coat and polished his shoes. "I arrived half an hour early and spent a long time walking around the inconspicuous door in the basement of a nearby building, where the meeting was supposed to take place. My heart was racing like a boy's before an exam. Finally, he gathered the courage to enter. There were already about 10 or 12 people in the small room with a long table. Most of them were elderly, like him. The air was filled with cigarette smoke and the smell of tea and cheap cookies. Everyone turned to look at him. He was a stranger. Come in, there's plenty of room," said a friendly, gray-haired man with glasses, who seemed to be the host. "A new person. We're very pleased." So it wasn't for nothing that the announcement was posted. Arkady Petrovich nodded timidly and perched on the edge of a chair. The presenter, who introduced himself as Sergei Ivanovich, told about the purpose of the club: to collect memories, old photos, stories about the area, which is rapidly changing, erasing the past. He suggested creating something like a national archive. Then they gave the floor to others. One woman recalled how there was a huge apple orchard on the site of the new shopping center and how they stole apples there as children. Another old man told how he went on dates with a girl on a now demolished street, and there was a smell of bread from a nearby bakery. Arkady Petrovich was silent at first, cowering in a corner. But then something broke through. Sergei Ivanovich had just shown him an old map, and Arkady Petrovich suddenly saw something on it that was no longer there. "This," he said, pointing with his finger, his voice hoarse and unusually loud, "wasn't just a wasteland. There were stables there. From before the war. I remember when I was a boy, we used to run there and they showed us the foals. And here," he moved his finger, "this wasn't a boulevard, but a dirt road leading to Pulkovo. Horses and carts used to travel along it. And in place of this supermarket," he paused, took a sip of tea, which was served to him, "in its place was a real, large pond. We went ice skating in the winter. It was filled in the 60s when construction began." Everyone looked at him with interest. His knowledge wasn't from books, it was from life. "And that apple orchard," he continued, addressing the woman, "it wasn't just any orchard. It was part of the estate of the merchant Korostylov. The house was demolished before the war, but the orchard remained. And the apples weren't just any, they were white nectar. It's a specific variety. Nowadays, you can't find it anywhere. They listened to him. They asked questions. They nodded. Sergei Ivanovich enthusiastically took notes. Arkady Petrovich spoke, and the words flowed from some hidden corner of his memory that he had long abandoned. He was back in his childhood, his youth, in a world that he remembered in great detail. He was needed. His experience and memory were valuable. After the meeting, which had lasted almost 2 hours, he felt exhausted and happy. He was slowly packing up when the woman who had been talking about the apple orchard approached him. She was short and lively, with intelligent, radiant eyes behind her old-fashioned glasses. "You remember everything so well, Arkady Petrovich," she said. "I've been listening to you." "Thank you." "Oh, don't mention it," he said. "It's nothing. It's not nonsense. It's our story. By the way, I think I'm your neighbor. Anna Smyanovna Zurovleva, from the 3rd floor, next to the entrance. I often see you in the window." He took a closer look. Indeed, the face was familiar. He had seen her in the yard, going to the clinic with the same shopping cart as he had. They left together. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled of wet asphalt and autumn. They walked slowly towards their homes. "Do you live alone?" she asked cautiously. "Yes," he nodded. "For a long time. And you?" "Me too." His husband had died, and his children had moved away. It was sometimes boring. They reached their courtyard. Arkady Petrovich stopped at his entrance. A phrase that he hadn't uttered in decades was on his mind. He was afraid it would sound ridiculous. "Anna Smyanovna, would you like to come in for tea?" he blurted out, looking somewhere to the side. She smiled. "With pleasure, Arkady Petrovich, but only next time. Today, as if for spite, I baked a cherry pie. I need to treat you. Tomorrow, maybe, I'll bake a fresh one in the morning." "Tomorrow," he nodded. "I'll be home tomorrow." He went up to his apartment. It didn't seem so empty to him. The ticking of the beef clock was no longer a countdown to nothingness, but a countdown to tomorrow. He went to the window. The courtyard was empty, but he was looking at it with different eyes. He wasn't just seeing the gray November landscape. He was seeing a place where he might encounter a familiar face tomorrow. He was seeing an apple orchard that didn't exist and a pond that had been filled in decades ago. His memory and his loneliness suddenly gained value and meaning. On Sunday, at exactly noon, the phone rang. "Olga." "Hi, Dad, how are you?" Arkady Petrovich picked up the phone. Instead of his usual, "Fine," he said, "You know, daughter, I have something planned. I've joined a club. It's about the history of our neighborhood. It's very interesting." There was a brief, surprised silence on the other end of the line. "Really? That's great, Dad. Will you tell me about it later?" "Definitely," he said. "And you know, my neighbor, Anna Smyanovna, has baked a pie. I'm going to visit her this evening." Another moment of surprised silence. Then Olga's voice became warmer, more alive, and more interested. "Dad, this is wonderful. You're bored by yourself. I'm so happy for you." They talked for longer than usual. He told her about the stables, the map, and the Bely Nalev apples. She listened and asked questions. For the first time in years, they were genuinely conversing. Arkady Petrovich's loneliness didn't disappear overnight. It didn't go anywhere. It still lived in this apartment, hiding in the corners, rustling the pages of unread books. But it ceased to be the main character of his story. It retreated, giving way to new, albeit small and fragile, connections. It became a quiet backdrop rather than a loud, deafening silence. He returned to his vantage point by the window. But now he was looking out not for the abstract characters of his series, but for Anna Smyanovna, who was about to come out of the house with a pie. He was waiting for the next meeting of the club to add to his memories. He was waiting for his daughter to call to tell him how his day had gone. He was still a lonely grandfather. But his loneliness suddenly had the taste of tea with cherry pie and the sound of voices that were foreign but so necessary to him.